The hospital smelled the same as it always did. Antiseptic and floor wax. Antiseptic and floor wax, and something faintly floral from the diffuser someone had placed near the nurse's station, which did absolutely nothing to mask the other two. I'd worked the evening shift at St. Michael's for 3 years, and I still wasn't used to it. Probably never would be. It was a Tuesday in late October, the kind of night where the rain comes sideways and soaks through your jacket before you even make it from the parking garage to the front doors. I'd wrung out my ponytail in the staff bathroom and told myself that was fine, that wet hair was the least of my problems, that I had a 7-hour shift ahead and a daughter at home with my neighbor watching her, and I needed to focus. Her name was Isla. She was 6, and she'd drawn me a picture that morning of the two of us holding hands in front of what I think was supposed to be a rainbow, though it looked more like a melting traffic cone. I'd folded it into my jacket pocket, and it was still there, slightly damp now, but there. I checked in, grabbed my badge, and started my rounds. The ward I worked was the 3rd floor. General internal medicine, a mix of post-surgical recovery and longer-stay patients. It wasn't glamorous. Nothing about nursing at a downtown Toronto hospital was glamorous, regardless of what television tried to tell people. It was paperwork and compression stockings and talking people through fear they didn't know how to name. It was good work, I believe that, even on the hard nights. Room 312 was a new admission. The chart said the patient had been transferred from emergency around 6 p.m. Chest pain, initially flagged as cardiac, now looking more like a stress response. Mid-30s male, no listed next of kin. I knocked twice, the way I always did, and pushed the door open with my shoulder. The man in the bed was sitting up slightly, looking at his phone. He didn't look up right away. And I had a few seconds, where I just stood there in the doorway with my clipboard and a blood pressure cuff over my arm, and something in my chest did something it hadn't done in years. I knew the shape of his jaw before I saw his face properly. I knew the way he held his shoulders, slightly uneven, the right one always a little higher than the left because of an old hockey injury he'd refused to have properly looked at when he was 22. His name was James. No, wait, it wasn't. It had been the name I'd called him in my head for a long time after, the way you sometimes rename someone after they leave, like it helps. His real name was Fletcher. Fletcher Hale. He looked up. The room was very quiet. "Hey," he said, and then, slower, "Oh." I didn't say anything for a moment. There's a thing they don't teach you in nursing school, which is what to do when the person in the bed is someone you used to love so much it made you stupid. Someone who left on a gray February morning 7 years ago with a duffel bag and an explanation that hadn't quite explained anything. Someone who did not know, who had never known, that 4 months after he got on that plane to Vancouver, I found out I was pregnant. "Hi," I said. My voice was level. I was proud of that. "You work here," he said. "I do." I came into the room properly and set the blood pressure cuff on the side table. Professional. I was a professional. "How are you feeling? Any chest pain in the last hour?" He watched me move around the room with an expression I couldn't read. "No," he said. "Better. They said the EKG was clear." It was. "The cardiologist will be back in the morning to confirm, but yes, the preliminary results look good." I wrapped the cuff around his arm, focused on the Velcro on the number that came up, on writing it in the correct column on the chart. "Normal. Everything normal." "You have a daughter," he said. I went still. "I saw a picture fall out of your pocket when you came in," he said, and pointed to the floor near the door, where a folded piece of paper had landed on the tile. The rainbow. The melting traffic cone. I walked over and picked it up, held it in my hand for a second. "Yes," I said. "I do. How old?" I looked at him directly for the first time since I'd walked in. He had the same eyes. That was the part I'd forgotten how much I remembered. Very dark brown, almost black in low light. The kind of eyes that made you feel like he was actually paying attention to what you were saying when he looked at you. Most people aren't actually looking when they look at you. He always had been. 6, I said. Something shifted in his expression. I couldn't tell what. I finished the chart entries, told him the Schneid nurse would check on him in 2 hours, told him to press the call button if he had any pain, and left the room. In the hallway, I stood with my back against the wall for about 30 seconds and breathed. Then I went and found my colleague Tanya at the nurse's station and said, very calmly, that I needed to swap room assignments for the night. She gave me a look. Tanya always gave me looks. It was one of her most reliable qualities. But she said fine, and we switched, and I spent the rest of the shift on the other end of the ward pretending everything was ordinary. It wasn't. I'd spent 6 years building something ordinary. That was the word I used for it in my own head. Ordinary. A 1-bedroom apartment in Leslieville that I'd eventually upgraded to a 2-bedroom when Isla started needing her own space. A routine. Daycare, then JK, then grade 1 this year. Groceries on Sunday. Laundry on Wednesday. My mother calling every Thursday evening to ask if I was eating enough. The particular ordinary of a woman who had learned to need very little from anyone. I hadn't planned any of it. That's the thing people don't understand when they assume I'd chosen to do it alone. I hadn't chosen it the way you choose a career path or a neighborhood. I'd chosen it in the way that you keep choosing the same road because no other road presented itself. Because the person who should have been there wasn't. And you can either stop walking, or you keep going. And I had kept going. Isla's father didn't know she existed. That had been my decision, made in a cold March when I was 8 weeks pregnant, and terrified and so angry I could barely see straight. Fletcher had left. He'd taken a job in Vancouver. A real one, a significant one, heading up some tech company's Canadian expansion team. And he'd been honest about it. I'll give him that much. He'd said he was going, that he wasn't ready for the life we'd been building together. That he thought we both deserved more than staying somewhere out of obligation. Very mature, very measured. I had not been measured. I had cried for 2 weeks, and then I had stopped crying, and then I had found out I was pregnant. I thought about calling him every day for a month. I wrote drafts of texts I never sent. And then I thought about what would happen if I did call. About him coming back out of obligation. About raising a child with someone who had already told me he didn't want to stay. And I made the choice I made. You can think what you want about that. I've thought everything about it already. The hardest part wasn't making the decision. The hardest part was every year after, when Isla would ask about her dad, and I would say that he and I had just gone different directions, that some families looked like this, that she was so loved, which was true. All of it was true. And still, every time, I felt the weight of the thing I wasn't saying, pressing against my ribs. She had his eyes. That was the thing I hadn't anticipated. I'd thought, somehow, that she would just look like me. That I would have this child who was wholly mine, and that would make it simpler. Instead, she had those dark, attentive eyes, and the way she looked at things, studying them, and sometimes I would catch her expression in a certain light and feel something complicated move through me. I didn't sleep well that night. I got home at 7:15 in the morning, relieved my neighbor, a retired teacher named Mr. Baines, who was genuinely a saint and had never once made me feel guilty for the early mornings. Got Isla up, made her oatmeal with the brown sugar on top the way she liked it, walked her to school, and then came home and lay in my bed staring at the ceiling. He was going to be discharged in a day, maybe 2. It was a big hospital. I could avoid it. I told myself this very firmly. I avoided it for about 18 hours. The second evening, I came in for my shift, and Tanya met me at the door to the locker room with an expression that I immediately did not like. "Your room swap," she said. 312 asked the charge nurse about you. I set my bag down. He asked about me how? By name. Asked if Jess McNamara was working this evening. Very politely, apparently. She tilted her head. "Old friend?" "Something like that," I said. I thought about it during the first half of my shift. I thought about the fact that he'd asked for me specifically. That he'd remembered my name, obviously, but also that he'd said it. Which meant he hadn't been rattled the way I'd been rattled. Which was annoying. That he still had those eyes, and that slightly uneven set to his shoulders, and that he'd picked up Isla's drawing from the floor before I'd even noticed it had fallen. At 9:30, when the ward had settled into its quieter nighttime rhythm, I went to room 312. He was awake, reading something on his phone. He'd been moved to a chair, which was a good sign. They only encouraged patients to use the chair when ambulation was going well. "You asked for me," I said. "I did." He set his phone down. "I didn't think you'd come." I almost didn't. I pulled the door mostly closed and stood with my arms folded. Not defensive, I told myself. Just cold. The ward ran cold at night. What do you want, Fletcher? It wasn't really a question. He heard that. I wanted to apologize, he said. I know it's late. I know there's probably nothing I can say that makes what I did okay. But I've thought about you a lot over the years, and I wanted to say it while I had the chance. You had a phone, I said. For 7 years. I know. And email. Which you know I have, because we have 3 mutual friends who copy us both on things. I know that too. So. I looked at him. Why now? He was quiet for a moment. Outside the window, the city was doing what Toronto does in October. Rain and orange light and the particular sound of streetcars on wet tracks. I'd loved that sound once. I'd loved a lot of things once. I came back, he said, to Toronto, permanently, 3 months ago. I hadn't known that. And I've been thinking about what I left behind, about whether it was actually what I told myself it was. Whether I was actually protecting us from something, or whether I was just scared. He looked at his hands. I think I was scared. That's very insightful, I said. It came out more clipped than I'd intended, or maybe exactly as clipped as I'd intended. I'm glad you've had time to reflect. He looked up. You're angry. I'm a nurse at 11 o'clock on a Wednesday night, and you're a patient, and this is a deeply inappropriate conversation for me to be having, I said. I'm going to check your chart and ask you about your pain levels, and then I'm going to leave. I did exactly that, but I came back the next morning before my shift ended. I don't entirely know why. I've asked myself that question enough times that I've stopped expecting an answer to surface. What I know is that I sat in the parking garage in my car for 20 minutes after clocking out, watching the early morning commuters walk past in the gray light, and then I went back inside and knocked on the door of room 312. He was getting discharged. His street clothes were on, the bag he'd come in with sitting by the door. He looked better in daylight, still tired, still a little pale, but like himself, like the person I'd known. I need to tell you something, I said. The look that crossed his face was careful, braced, like he already knew, on some level, that what was coming was significant. I have a daughter, I said. Her name is Isla. She's 6 years old. I stopped. The words sat in the air between us. She was born in October, 7 years ago. Fletcher was very still. The math, I said. I'm doing the math, he said. His voice had gone very quiet. I should have told you, I said. I've told myself 100 different versions of why I didn't, and some of them are even partially true. But the real reason is that you left and I was devastated, and I was angry, and I didn't want to give you the chance to come back for the wrong reasons. I wanted. My voice caught, just briefly. I wanted someone to come back for me, not for an obligation. He looked at me for a long moment. I'd expected more reaction, raised voice, some kind of confrontation, the thing I'd been bracing against for 6 years every time I imagined this conversation. Instead, he was very quiet in a way that was, somehow, harder to withstand. Does she know about me? He said. She knows I loved her dad, I said. That we wanted different things. That she's wanted. Is she? He said, and then stopped. He pressed his fingers briefly to his mouth, collected himself. Is she happy? That was not the question I'd expected. She's very happy, I said. She's funny. She draws pictures of rainbows that look like traffic cones. She just learned to read, and she reads everything. Cereal boxes, street signs, the little text at the bottom of car commercials. She wants a dog. My chest ached. She's the best thing I've ever done. He exhaled slowly. I could see him processing it, the scale of it, the years of it, everything that word 6 actually contained. I don't know what you want from me, he said. I don't know if you want anything. You could have not told me. You chose to. I chose to, I agreed. I don't entirely know why yet. Maybe, he said carefully, because part of you knew she deserved more than a story about 2 people who went different directions. I looked at him. His eyes were the same as I remembered. His eyes were the same as hers. I'm not promising you anything, I said. I'm not. I stopped, regrouped. She is my daughter, first and entirely. Whatever happens from here, that doesn't change. I understand that, he said. I don't know who you are anymore, I said. 7 years is a long time. You could be completely different. I probably am, he said. In some ways, so we'd have to figure that out. Yes. The parking garage attendant's intercom went off somewhere down the hall, tinny and far away. A cleaning cart rattled past the door. Ordinary sounds. The ordinary sounds of a hospital morning, the shift changing, people going about the particular business of keeping other people alive. "I'm going to go home," I said. "I have to sleep. I worked all night." "Okay," he said. "I'm going to pick up my daughter from school at 3:15, I said. "She has swimming on Thursdays and she'll be tired and a little cranky because she always is after swimming." "Okay," he said again. He was watching me very carefully. "I'm not saying you should come." I said it clearly, deliberately. "I'm not saying that. I don't know what I'm saying." I picked up my jacket from where I'd left it over the back of the visitor's chair. "But the school is called St. Clair's, and it's on Gerrard Street, and pickup is at 3:15. I walked to the door. "Jess," he said. I stopped but didn't turn around. "I'm sorry," he said. "Not for the right reasons, or because it changes anything. Just because it's true. I'm sorry." I nodded once, which he might not have even been able to see from where he was sitting. Then I walked down the hallway to the elevator, pressed the button for the ground floor, and stood with my hands in my pockets and that damp drawing of a rainbow still folded against my palm. I told myself I didn't know what would happen at 3:15. I told myself a lot of things on that elevator ride down. The lobby doors opened onto a cold October morning, and the rain had finally stopped, and somewhere across the city my daughter was at school, learning to read the labels on things. Learning that words meant exactly what they said, that you could trust them that way. And I stepped out into the gray light and breathed, and waited to find out what I believed.